Well, I feel the inspiration in the room, so I think it's great that we refocus our topic on another area that is equally inspiring. And I don't have statistics with me, you'll all be relieved to know, but I think some of the millennial research shows that our children, at least my children's age, are probably much more comfortable with the idea of diversity and are much more inclusive in their approach to other individuals. So again, I'm going to stick with my theme of us kind of learning from our students and our children around us. And to lead us in this reflective examination and raising some good questions with us is Rene Padilla, the Executive Director of Global Engagement, or what I like to call him, my favorite world traveler and man of culture. Rene?
I do have some statistics, so I will be able to share with those. I'm very happy to be here, and certainly want to start by saying what a pleasure it is to be amongst the leaders. I said to Marianne earlier, I don't usually get nervous on bigger things, but this time I am a little nervous, and I think it's because you will see me tomorrow and next week, and usually my speeches are with strangers, and that's fine, right? So bear with me. I did just get back from Japan, and this morning it did hit me that I missed a day somewhere in there. So hopefully I won't miss time here, but I will get caught up. The context of internationalization is often clouded with preconceived ideas of, exotic places that we can go for vacation, or places where corporations can make a lot of money. But for us, as part of a Jesuit university, the call is to consider the most central unit of internationalization. And this is the person, or the experience of being a foreigner, whether it is a foreigner among us, or whether it's about us being foreigners where we are or in other places. So being a foreigner is at the heart of diversity. I am reminded of the words God gave the people of Israel as they were exiled in Babylon many centuries ago. And he admonished them as foreigners to invest deeply in the places they found themselves, to flourish and to seek the good of their new home. And it says in the book of Jeremiah, "The Lord who rules over all is the God of Israel. He speaks to all those he forced to go from Jerusalem to Babylon. And he says, build houses and make your homes there. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Get married, have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons. Give your daughters to be married. Then they too can have sons and daughters. Let there be many more of you and not fewer. Also, work for the success of the city I have sent you to. Pray to the Lord for that city. If it succeeds, you too will enjoy success." So the question for us today is, how do we help the stranger, the foreigner, the one who is different from us, actually flourish among us, to join us in seeking the good of our city, or to bring their gifts to bless this university? We will have an opportunity for greater discussion on these topics I'll bring up today at our mini summit in July. And so as you consider writing things on these cards, I would ask you to consider some of the questions I will bring, but also just your own thoughts about diversity and inclusion on this campus. At that mini summit, we will be talking very specifically about diversity and in terms of dialogue with each other. As you all know, racial tensions have been at the center of American news and political debate in recent months, but the story of ethnic division is actually a global one with a long and tortured history. The rise and fall of race as a concept is a fascinating story, which we don't have much time to recount today. However, it does provide a critical context on the topic I was asked to address today, which was Introduction to Diversity and Inclusion. The concept of race can be traced to the beginning of the last century when thinkers throughout the academy, in classics, history, philology, philosophy, as well as in the new life sciences, had become convinced that biologists could identify, using specific criteria, a small number of human races. Most would have begun the list with the black, white, and yellow races, and many would have added Semitic race, including Jews and Arabs, an American Indian race, and so on. People thought that race was important not just because it allowed one to define human groups scientifically, but also because they believed that racial groups shared inherited moral and psychological tendencies that helped explain their different histories and cultures. Of course, there were skeptics. Charles Darwin, for example, believed that his evolutionary theory demonstrated that human beings were of a single stock, with local varieties produced by differences in the environment and through a process that was bound to result in groups with blurred edges. By the late 19th century, many European and American thinkers believed deeply in the biological reality of race and thought that the natural affinity among members of each group made races the appropriate units for social and political organization. Essentialism, or the idea that human groups have properties in common that explain not just their shared superficial appearances, but also their deep tendencies of moral and cultural lives, was not new. In fact, it is nearly universal, because the inclination to suppose that people who look alike have deep properties in common is built into the human cognition, appearing early in life without prompting. Late 19th century scientists and intellectuals built up the idea of that races were biologically determined and politically significant, only to have their late 20th century counterparts tear them down. Unfortunately, recognizing that racial categories are socially constructed rather than innate doesn't make racial problems easier to solve. Stark racial inequalities persist even as official, quote unquote, and individual level racism has declined. Our country may be post-racist because the laws have changed, but it is hardly post-racial. Historic legacies have baked the racism of previous eras into the cake of contemporary institutions, from finance to housing to criminal justice, and yes, to higher education. Even private, faith-based, mission-driven higher education. So what to do with all this? Is multiculturalism the answer? Or the emphasis on race for political mobilization? Increased interactions among members of various ethnicities, affirmative action. Europe has had a disastrous experience with multiculturalism in which attempts to respect ethnic and cultural differences have spurred the very tensions they were designed to soothe. The case of Latin America, where I come from, is curious, where racial mixing was long considered a virtue rather than a vice. Societies prided themselves on their color blindness, and class trumped race as a ground for political mobilization. In the last decade, citizens of indigenous and African descent are visibly active politically, hold state ministry offices, and are present in political protests. The introduction of racial and ethnic politics has coincided with widespread public support for democracy as a form of government. However, this has not been enough to eliminate racial and ethnic inequality. And racial and ethnic communities in Latin America remain some of the most disadvantaged in a region that ranks amongst the most unequal in the world. The lesson of affirmative action, which has been enacted in many places around the world as a way of improving the lot of excluded communities, also are clear. Such programs can occasionally help in the economic sphere, have a mixed record in improving social cohesion, and some would say are an unmitigated disaster when it comes to politics. Discussions of racial issues usually throw off more heat than light, and too often assume that local distinctions and attitudes are universal and immutable rather than particular and contingent. You can't see this real well, and I'll interpret this for you a little bit. Of course, ethno-racial inequality is not the only social inequality that matters. In 2013, the nearly 20 million white people below the poverty line in the United States made up slightly more than 40% of the country's poor. Nor is racial prejudice the only significant motive for discrimination. Ask Christians in Pakistan and Indonesia, or Muslims in Europe, or LGBT people in Uganda. For years, American higher education institutions have been working to increase racial and ethnic diversity of our campuses. This is driven in part by arguments for social justice and the felt need for equal and expanded access to higher education. So in this slide, which you can't see, can you see the underneath reasonably clear? Okay, I don't need to interpret it to you. Okay. We also seek diverse student bodies because we know from numerous research studies that engaging with others from a variety of different backgrounds improves the learning environment. Our learning is impoverished when we are in a homogeneous group of like-minded individuals who share the same kind of experiences, beliefs, and aspirations. As the Association of American Colleges and Universities so often points out, diversity should be talked about as inclusive excellence, for only when a campus is truly inclusive can it make a claim to excellence. And we have made significant progress in improving the racial and ethnic diversity in our U.S. institutions. Over the past 40 years, freshman classes across the United States have changed from over 90% white to about 73% white. According to the most recent Chronicle of Higher Education survey on the topic, which was in 2012, African Americans now comprise 11.5% of our freshman classes, and 12.4% of our first-year students are Latino, Mexican American, or Puerto Rican, or Chicano. It's remarkably close to the national census data from 2010, which report that 72.4% of Americans are white and 12.6% are black. There is, however, still considerable disparity between the prevalence of Hispanics and Latinos in our campuses and in the population as a whole. 16.3% of the national population identify as Hispanic, Latino, or Mexican in terms of national origin. While our progress to date in diversifying our student population is laudable, we can and should do more to improve inclusiveness in our campuses as a whole. In that slide, you can see the national averages, and the darker column is what we know about our Creighton freshman class. Nationally, in 2014, only 7% of faculty were black and 4% were Hispanic, while only 19% of all executive, managerial, and administrative staff were non-white. Here again, you can see that in comparison to our Creighton statistics. So the three columns to the left are, I need to look at it here, the student group, the faculty group, and the staff group, to the extent that we know the international origin on our campus. And the other side is the comparison with the national origin or Omaha itself. Race continues to be a source of division, misunderstanding, prejudice, and discrimination in our campuses and in our country. Educational institutions have an obligation to address these inequalities in their admission policies, their student life programming, their hiring, and their curricula. But there are other dimensions of diversity that have long been underemphasized and that also deserve serious attention. Our record of providing equal access to all socioeconomic classes, for example, is discouraging, as this figure illustrates. According to the most recent economic data available in 2013, 40.4% of American households earned less than $50,000 annually, 21% earned between $100,000 and $199,000, and only 5% earned more than $200,000. On our campuses, however, only 30.9% of freshmen report their annual family income as less than $50,000, while 24.8% report household earnings of between $100,000 and $199,000, and a whopping 12% report incomes exceeding $200,000. Given current college costs, this may not seem surprising, but it does not begin to approach equal access, even given the commitment of many elite schools to meeting students' total financial needs. Richard Kallenberg's research indicates that economically disadvantaged students are 29 times less likely to be found on elite college campuses than economically advantaged students. And yet this phenomenon receives none of the attention or moral outrage associated with effects of cultural or efforts to curtail racial preference as an affirmative action. Race and socioeconomic class can coincide, presenting even greater obstacles to access for poor Black or Latino students who do not benefit from our habit of construing diversity only in terms of race. But these factors can also operate independently. In their book, The Shape of the River, William Bowen and Derek Bach reported that 86% of Black students who enrolled in the 28 selective universities they studied were middle class and upper middle class. So relying upon racial identity as a proxy for class is also not advisable. Recent research has also demonstrated that the academic achievement gap across socioeconomic strata has been growing. According to Martha Bailey and Susan Dernosky, 54% of the affluent students born in the United States between 1979 and 1982 were able to complete college, compared with only 9% of low-income students from the same generation. Since college completion is the most important indicator of success in the workplace, the inability of students from lower socioeconomic classes to complete college has lifelong effects on them, on their families, and obviously on the nation. In addition to socioeconomic status, we need to consider worldview when we are discussing diversity. Class and race may often align with political and ideological belief, but that alignment is far from perfect. The foundations of our society and our democratic government require us to be able to talk respectfully with people who hold different opinions and have different backgrounds than we do. So the question before us is really, what should we do about diversity at Creighton University? So I want to briefly comment now about efforts to increase diversity amongst faculty and staff, because that is one of the most significant indicators of sustainable diversity amongst the student body. The imperative to increase the diversity amongst the student body is clear. There's abundant literature that indicates that the student body cannot out-diversify the faculty and staff significantly. In fact, students look to see themselves represented or reflected in the faculty and staff of the institutions they choose to attend. Often, that will also make after that, I will also make some comments about our efforts to increase the internationalization at this university, because I believe that is a very important part of that effort and our mission. And let me say that I firmly believe that although the business side of higher education can no longer be ignored, we at Creighton University are in the business of caring for souls, not just minds. And that is what should guide how we make and prioritize our business enterprise. During the most recent strategic planning process, I was part of a group of faculty and staff across the university and across the divisions of the university that was given a very specific charge to recommend strategies to increase faculty and staff diversity on this campus. In the past, our main efforts have been directed at increasing the diversity among students, but there was a concern that we were lagging behind in the area of faculty and staff, and indeed that we may possibly be losing ground. This effort involved quite a bit of discussion, and of course, the mandatory retrospective analysis. Whenever you put 2 people in a room, there's diversity, right? When you put 10 people in a room, committed people, it can be very electrifying. The retrospective analysis certainly echoed what many of us knew already about Creighton University. It is difficult to put some form of boundary around the notion of diversity because to some degree each one of us has a point of view and we have learned to consider the most valid. And here I think is the strength and contradiction of the Creighton community. We place high value on diversity, yet many people we spoke with commented on this sense of lack of progress in diversity on this campus. A systematic review of published research on the subject showed us that there's a clear and stable trend in higher education. Minority faculty and staff have priorities that we should consider in developing a strategy to increase their presence among us. Those of us who are members of minority look for the presence of other diverse faculty, staff, and students. We look for diversity at the highest levels of leadership. Like students, minority faculty and staff look to see themselves reflected in the leadership of an institution. Minority faculty and staff look for longevity, both in rank and tenure of the faculty that are present on that campus. Look for the availability of mentorship programs or the sense of collectivism on a campus. Look for evidence of open communication about and strategies to address microaggressions, such as symbolic racism, slights by colleagues, expectation to be more qualified than non-minority counterparts, biases in students' evaluations, and so on. Let me tell you a quick, brief example of the notion of microaggression. When I finished my PhD quite a few years ago, a very well-intentioned colleague said to me, "Congratulations, not many of your people reached that end." And I said to her, "Well, what do you mean?" And she looked at me perplexed, and she said, "Well, not many Hispanics get to that point." And I knew she was well-intended, right? But to me, obviously, it's a story that I still keep telling, right? It's still with me. Because what she was saying to me is that to some degree I was too weird, too different, too unique because of having reached something that for me was very natural. And I've heard stories similar to this across campus over and over. The theory of symbolic racism postulates that the content of right racism has changed, shifting away from a focus on biological racism, and today focuses on the belief that little racial discrimination remains, that minorities do not work hard enough, that they complain too much, and often have received undeserved advantages. Our team concluded that even the use of the word diversity distracted from what vision there might be about diversity at Creighton. A focus on convergence rather than divergence is more consistent with the mission of the university and the identity of our institution because it has a strong implicit and explicit expectation that we might commit consciously to a way of interaction that emphasizes above all the desire to listen with the purpose of understanding and the purpose of being changed or transformed. So the image of diversity at Creighton might be better presented as a creative convergence rather than a mathematical equation of the numbers of people from different ethnicities, backgrounds, and disciplines. I don't know if you caught this, but this is a picture made of jelly beans. We're building to it, right? The very subtlety of symbolic discrimination makes it particularly impossible for organizations to develop and enforce policies against it. Symbolic discrimination, therefore, may only be reduced through long-term educational interventions at the attitude level. Informal employee relations have an impact on a person's ability to be successful or flourish at our organization. Mentoring and information sharing often take place in voluntary social connections and events. People excluded from those events are at a disadvantage. The tireless search for common ground should be a staple of all organizational and team endeavors. Organizational culture should foster creativity and positive conflict resolution. Positive conflict resolution is a byproduct of long-term learning and dialogue. So educational interventions that foster a culture of communication will most likely be experienced as supportive of diversity. Organizational rewards should mostly be attached to teams rather than individuals. Demographic diversity should be present at all levels of the organization. Contact among groups only reduces discrimination when it takes place among people that consider themselves equal. In psychotherapy, we talk of two perspectives of change. People come to us for psychotherapy in order to solve a problem, and typically it's a change that needs to occur in them, not just in their environment. Change one is a superficial change. It's likened to the superficial flow of a river. It moves quickly, but doesn't change the landscape. It's important because it gives the image of change, and it motivates people. It can give people an image that something is occurring. And in fact, maybe, possibly, many of the diversity initiatives we've had in the past have been of that category. Change two, however, is that deep flow in the river that does change landscape. It can move a river from one direction to another. Change two are those things that take a long time, are slow moving, but are deep in terms of the ingrained habit in an institution. So our group focused on these two kinds of changes. In change one, and you will see already some product of these kinds of initiatives that have occurred, the top changes, or those superficial changes, have to do with things like revitalizing the website so that there could be a presence, an image of diversity that people could see that better reflects us. The question about whether there should be a revival of the affinity groups. There's diversity training that's being explored, and already some of it has been set up. Annual leadership summits, such as this one, where we're talking about the topic, and so on. You see some examples there. The deeper changes are things that might change the habit and the way in which we operate. So the search committee process training is already unfolded and is already part of how groups will be looking for new staff and new faculty, such as including the question, what do you look for when you look for diversity in your new job? But also looking specifically for people that are diverse, not just for those who show up and apply for the job, but actively going to find them. There may be need for some curriculum enhancements. Those haven't been initiated or even discussed. But those are the kinds of things that could make significant change. We've piloted a small seminar this semester, co-led with Barb Harris, who's not here, put two psychotherapists in a room and talk about diversity, and yes, on a weekly basis, we share deeply. There is tears, those are not required, it just so happened with this particular group. But what it has given us is an opportunity to hear deeper stories from people, both from their experience of being excluded, but also the fear of excluding others, and of not knowing how to be present in a diverse group. So it's been very powerful, and that will continue, and you will see more information and possibly an invitation to join this ongoing seminar that will be taking place every semester until We run out of money, I guess. And other initiatives. What became clear to us, however, that just having initiatives is not sufficient. That there needs to be an ongoing structure that supports these activities, that can be held responsible and can hold others responsible. And that's what that little cup of a structure is there. So what's going to happen, in particular in the summit that's coming up, the mini summit in the summer, is that we want to talk to the community across campus. What would this structure look like? Where should that structure lie? Who should be part of that structure? What should be the relationships across campus? So that in fact there is a specific place, specific people that can help us and can guide us and can encourage us and give us hope for the change that we may need on this campus. Our status is, and this is not representative, if your unit is not there, I apologize. I was constructing and correcting this on a plane from Tokyo, and so, that's very small. So I apologize if yours not there. That's not the purpose. It's only to be representative, to be symbolic. So what we have is various offices that may have responsibility in diversity. And then we have a number of initiatives or smaller units that also have some investment in diversity. And therefore, we may have hundreds of small initiatives that don't change us because they're too limited to one space, one initiative, one program. And if diversity is going to be to the center, we need some way to connect all these kinds of things so that we can assure that at some point we have touched all forms of diversity, that every form that can be changed or not changed has been respected, listened to, and considered in how we can carry out our mission. So that we would move from this vision, where we all exist together but separate, to this vision, where we would be coexisting in a way that is actually collaborative. Dr. Bradbury earlier emphasized that we are driven by our mission to continue attracting the best and the brightest students to Creighton who will go forth and make a better world. I would say that international students and international scholars are an important part of that. So I've got 3 slides here that I want to bring your attention to. There are more people in that small circle that you see there. More than half the people of this world live within that circle. I want you to keep that in mind because it seems to me that our initiatives directed to learning from that part of the world are essential. We cannot move forward without knowing that, and we can't be full in our mission without addressing that. So initiatives in China and Japan, Southeast Asia are really critical. But considering that that's where all those people live, this is where our students, let me see, I can't see the caption down there. Oh, this is where our international students come from. It's very gray from here, so I can't notice what it says. So let me go back a couple of times. Half the world lives within that circle. This is where our international students come from. We have about 180 degree-seeking students right now on campus, and that doesn't count the students that come or for short-term, 3-week, 4-week, or months. And then this is where we send our students on study abroad. We have about 50 students going. So let me go back because I want to hope you can notice, in my mind, what I'm trying to build towards here. Where the world lives, where our students come from, where we send our students. Obviously, the preponderance is towards Europe, where there's people that are basically similar to the students. So we need to do something about this, as well as other things on campus. But I wanted to mention this because that's the current initiative that I'm very invested in about helping our campus learn from the parts of the world that are not represented here. Only 1% of the world has access to higher education. Only 1% has access to higher education. Our students are the future of that world that doesn't get that access. We are driven by our mission to continue attracting the best and brightest students to Creighton who will go forth and make a better world. And I would amend this statement, with all due respect, Dr. Bradbury, to say that we are driven by our mission to continue attracting the best and brightest faculty and staff to Creighton who will form students who go forth and make a better world. So I leave you with these questions to ponder, and I do hope seriously ponder and bring answers to the summit. Take them back to units to discuss in preparation for that summit in July. Write down the answers in these cards today, if you like. Are we ready to increase diversity on this campus? What do we have to offer? Why would somebody come here that isn't like the majority of people here? And then what do we need to do to be ready for diversity? As Dr. Lopez wrote, the future, how we hope, determines how well we live our lives. Hope matters. Hope is a choice. Hope can be learned. Hope can be shared with others. What is our hope for the stranger, the foreigner, the one who is different from us? What is our hope for them to actually flourish among us, to join us in seeking the good of our city, or to bring the gifts to bless this university? Thank you.
Rene slipped away before you could ask him any questions or make comments. So I want to invite you, maybe in the next 3 minutes, while this is all pretty fresh in your mind, to take seriously, and in fact, I'm going to go back to this, to take seriously some questions that he poses for us that I think are very significant questions. Are we ready to invite greater diversity to our campus? What do we have to offer diverse faculty and staff candidates? What do we need to learn to be ready for greater diversity among faculty and staff? Given that it is that diversity amongst us that will truly help us advance and promote and support and enable and reinforce and encourage the diversity among the students that we want to produce for this world. So let's take 3 to 5 minutes, and please jot down some questions, whether you take them with you yourself or you leave them on the table for the July summit. Let's take 3 minutes, and then we'll use this as a way to begin winding down into a period of reflection. I'm overhearing thoughtful conversations. I'm even seeing some people apparently draw and diagram, so the creativity is flowing. Are there any things that you would like to share or maybe direct to Dr. Padilla before we move into our closing? Anything you wish to share or to ask? Oh, yes. There you go. We'll send the microphone over to this table.
I shared at our table something we'd heard from Rene talking earlier about the importance of the faculty-staff diversity in attracting the student diversity. If we want more diverse students on campus, we need to really have them see, and they say that, we need to see who the faculty and staff look like here, and do they look like us. There was a student that I had spoken to had come, I don't remember now if he's current freshman now, I think so, but had said, you know, I saw on the website that there were pictures, diverse students, and that we would have on the website. Had opportunities to talk to Multicultural Affairs office. It was really excited, and he said, and then I got into the classrooms once I got here, and it was all different, and I felt like I was duped. So I guess that's a question. While we would like to see on our website, on things that will attract students who are diverse, we have to consider, are we really putting there what we look like? Or is it to attract group, and then when they get here, they don't feel like this is what they kind of bought into, they bought. So I think it's an important piece.
And really, obviously, there's an answer to that one, because it's a circular answer, right? So if we put who we are, we won't attract who we want. If we don't put who we won't attract who we want. So I think it's hard. That's why I use the jelly beans, because in our discussion, all the images were the mandatory black, Hispanic, and white person, and occasionally an Asian person, and the photos you can buy, right? And that's not us. But the problem, ultimately, I think, is that we have to figure out a way to show the world that diversity isn't just about the color of skin, that we have to figure out a way that we can market. And Jim, I was just talking to him, that we can figure out how, if we can articulate what we have to offer, that has to be what's there, in my opinion. But I'll share you the stories. We've recently been, this semester, talking to international students, and about half of our international students want to quit mid-semester, the first semester they're here. Part of that is, home culture shock and homesickness. But most often the theme is, I don't see myself fitting here, and I don't see people wanting to get to know me, right? And that's because I think our student body often doesn't know how to deal with that. So it's not just representative, it's also what are we doing to be attractive and to be interested. Anyway.
I think we can see why we're going to need to continue to have conversations. So mark July 24th on your calendar. You'll be getting more information about that. And as we begin to wrap up and reflect on what we've learned today, I take no greater pleasure than into introducing our Associate Vice Provost for Mission and Ministry, and I dare say my friend, Susan Natz, to lead us in a closing examen.
Thank you, Marianne. And I'd like to thank all of the people who helped organize this wonderful morning for us today. Katie, Janelle, Jeff, and the whole team, and especially our great presenters. Let's give them another hand. So before I begin this prayer, I'd like to give a little history for those who may not be familiar with this Jesuit tradition. One of the few rules of prayer that St. Ignatius made for the Jesuit order was the requirement that Jesuits practice the examen, also pronounced examen, twice daily. It's a habit that Jesuits and many other Christians practice to this day. It is an ancient practice in the Church, which is a technique of quiet, prayerful reflection on the events of the day in order to detect God's presence and discern God's direction for us. In the article, Rummaging for God, Praying Backwards Through Your Day, written by our own Father Dennis Ham, he advises us, and I quote, "If God wants to communicate with us, it has to happen in the course of a 24-hour day, for we live in no other time. Rummaging for God is an expression that suggests going through a drawer full of stuff, feeling around, looking for something very important that you are sure must be in there somewhere. I think that image catches some of the feel of what is classically known in church language as the prayer of examen." End of quote. So, as we rummage for God, I will lead you in a series of guided reflections and questions. I will pause at times to allow you to discover, imagine, and go deep within yourself. Thank you for honoring the silence. Let us now begin our examen. I invite you, out of your own faith tradition, or by connecting to where you have found meaning and felt transcendence in your life to close your eyes. Sit comfortably and relax as we look for God's movement. Become aware of the gift of your breathing. Breathe in slowly. Breathe out slowly. Breathe in. Breathe out. Take a few moments to be attentive to your body. If there is any tension in your body, allow yourself to relax in those areas and to feel peace flow through you. Feel your oneness with all who have gathered here today. All who have come to this place. Feel your oneness with the universe. Feel your oneness with God. Think about all of the moments of this morning from the time you woke up until now when you felt gratitude. Perhaps the aroma of coffee, a hug from a loved one, a smile from a colleague, or an insight from one of the presentations. When were you aware of God's presence today? As you reflect upon this summit, which focused on hope, diversity, and inclusion, re-immerse yourself and think about what moved you in a positive way. Take some time to remember those feelings and how might God have been nudging you. Were there moments when you were uncomfortable or challenged? What moments surprised you, where you were touched in a way that was unexpected? What comments or ideas became moments of connection with God or others that you did not think would happen? Now spend a few moments asking our Creator where you are being called to go forward from here today, to discover hope, and become a creator of inclusive excellence in your work at Creighton. Where and how might God be challenging you to open your heart? How will you be a catalyst in promoting a future that others can embrace with enthusiasm? Be aware of how God has shown love for you this day. Be thankful as you think of God's love and the guidance of God's Spirit as you go forth from here. Become aware of your breathing. Thank God for the gift of breath. And slowly open your eyes. And together we say amen. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. What a wonderful way to wrap up this very quick day. As you can see, the flowers are blooming, and we have a great spring and month of May and renewal ahead of us. And to perhaps leave us with some closing remarks and concluding inspiration, Chris Bradbury will close out our day in time for those of you who need to get to the Leaders for Life, and other luncheons will be on your way soon.
Thank you, Mary Ann. This has been a great morning. I hope all of you have appreciated what we heard this morning. And so much of it's translational. We can take it and we can apply it. And when you think about what was said earlier, Shane made some great points. It's really not all that difficult. It's just a matter of getting into those habits. So we've got some really, really good things to think about. So again, thank you all for being here today. It's been, I think, a very productive morning. I do want to recognize those individuals who were involved in getting this program together. So would all of those involved with today's program, please stand and be recognized. I know there are a number of you here. Please stand. So thank you again to the leadership planning team. I want to thank our video team, our video crew in the back, our catering, and our reservations. All deserve thanks for a great day today. That powerful examine Susan Nats just let us in is exactly what makes Creighton who we are. I hope you take away today from this and from all of our speakers in our sessions a renewed commitment and vitality and a deeper understanding of why you are here. You are here today because you have a very important role to play in helping build a better, stronger Creighton University. I hope you were able to see the link between a diverse community and working together for the betterment of all. And I hope you feel empowered and supported to make a difference in the culture, not only at Creighton, but in our wider world. Stay tuned for our ongoing development opportunities for us as individuals and teams. One that is scheduled is the Mini Summit, July 24th, so put that in the save your date for yourself, where we will revisit hope, diversity, and inclusion. If you're interested, please stop at the table outside, right outside of the doors, to pick up your copy of Shane's book, Making Hope Happen. So thank you again. Please enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.